So next speaker is probably the most famous speaker of our community. He's the community member #1. He joined the community something like 15 seconds after I've created it. If you go back in the meetup group, you will see that he's the #1. You didn't know that, huh?
No, I didn't know that. No. Okay, so let's wait. Okay, here we are. So I'm not going to talk about oil or beer. Instead, I'm going to talk about politics. Because you cannot escape politics. Huh? So one day a crisis happens. The next day politicians come together and sanctions are imposed. And on the third day, financial institutions need to implement the sanctions that were just given. Now you might think, how difficult can that be? Huh? You take a list of clients, you take the list of sanctions, you compare them, and off you go. Well, it's a little bit more complicated than that. I'm not going to bore you with all the, let's say, regulational issues, but I'm going to focus on one little thing. And for that, I want you to look at this gentleman here. Not the picture, but his name. So this is Viktor Yanukovych, and he's the former prime minister of the Ukraine. And now he happens to be on a sanction list. Now, how do you spell his name? Is that Victor with a V, or is that Victor with a W? Is that with a C in the middle, or with a K in the middle? Is that Yanukovych with a Y, an I, or a J? Now, we at the Data Analytics Lab of Euroclear, we often use very complicated solutions if they are required, but if we can resolve a problem with a simple solution, we prefer that. And in this case, we looked at something which was invented about 50 years ago by a Russian mathematician called Vladimir Levenstein. And he developed a method which allows you to basically compare to what extent two words are similar. And the way you do that is by counting the minimal number of edits that you need to do to go from one word to another. Just a second. Okay. So for instance, if you want to go from intention to execution, you basically need to take 5 steps. And you cannot see it on the screen, I think, but you basically need to delete the I, you need to replace the N by an E, and so on and so forth. Now you can very well imagine that if you do that on a sanction list, it becomes suddenly much easier to avoid problems with names that are more or less similar. Now there is also a downside to this, because the number of comparisons you need to make becomes very large in some cases. And the largest comparison we had to do, and that's not a typical one, usually it's smaller, but one of them was 2.5 trillion comparisons, which is, if it would take 1 second to do one, you would do them all one after the other. You would have to start 75,000 BC in order to finish today. And so the Euroclear management did not accept that timeline, so we used to string this package in R, which is much faster. You can do it in parallel. And with some optimization tricks, we could basically bring it down to a more or less reasonable level. Now for the results, I will have to disappoint you because it's a secret. I cannot tell you whether Euroclear found culprits in their systems or not. But to make up for that, I have taken the list of participants, so that's all of you guys, and I've compared that, not with the sanction list because you never know what comes out, but I've compared that with yourself. And that allows us to see whether there are people with similar names. Now, I understand that I'm not allowed to make the first joke. So there are 2 Chris Petersen, I'm sorry about that. But there are also some interesting near matches. Huh? We have, for instance, Mark Immer. Where is Mark Immer? Still here? And Mark Timmers. Maybe you should have a drink together. Same thing for Tom Francis and Tom Franks. And with that, I want to thank you for your attention.